For the past 20 years, I've had the honor and privilege of working alongside CEOs to advance women's progress in the workplace. I produce events, and on these stages, many CEOs are asked what advice they have for those in the audience who aspire to leadership roles. Without fail, the feedback is generally to take a risk, do something that scares you, step outside your comfort zone. Well, I'll admit that it's not my comfort zone, but I have in my own life seen the benefits of stepping away from the easy and into the unknown. Here's an example. January 2017, I took part in the largest single-day protest in history, the Women's March. Now, exercising my right to protest, even as an adult, this wasn't something I'd ever done before. My comfort zone, and this. But as I was boarding the bus steps to New York City on that cold January morning, I got a text from my sister. It was a photo of an It's a Girl balloon. She and her husband were expecting their first child, and they had just gotten the news. I had a niece on the way. Here was my why that morning. Because I learned about another girl coming into the world and into our family the moment that I was leaving for the Women's March, I thought, this is my purpose. And taking that step outside my comfort zone opened my eyes to the ways that I could affect change through advocacy. Now, you might say, why was there a Women's March at all? Are things really so bad in America for women? You might say, you were able to travel unaccompanied without fear of violence due to your gender. You were able to buy a bus ticket with money that you earned at a job where there's laws to protect you against gender-based discrimination. You had the right to assemble. You were able to make a written sign because you got an education. Now, you're lucky to be a woman in America. And to be sure, these basic human rights, they're not afforded to many women and girls worldwide. Poverty and cultural norms mean that there are 132 million girls who are not in school worldwide. And it's not just these girls who suffer. It's the entire human race. You see, when a girl goes to school, she gets information about nutrition, healthcare, family planning. She's more likely to delay pregnancy and have fewer healthier children. She's less likely to be forced into child marriage. She's more likely to participate in the paid labor market, where she'll take that salary and invest it back into her family. So all of these factors combined mean that when a girl goes to school, families, communities, even nations are lifted out of poverty. But we were talking about women in the USA, right? You might be surprised to know that this brilliant quote by Ginny Rometty, she's the former CEO of IBM, she blazed trails in the tech industry. At the time when she said this, she was one of only 24 women CEOs in the entire Fortune 500. There are more large companies being run by men named John than there are women collectively running those companies. And when there are less women in decision-making roles, what does that mean for the average working woman in America? It means this. These three countries have something in common: Papua New Guinea, Suriname, and the United States of America. These three countries are the only countries in the entire world that offer no guaranteed paid leave to new mothers. The only nations in the world. And there are many barriers to women's advancement, and we'd be here all evening just to scratch that surface. But the US is woefully lacking compared to every other developed nation in the world in two key areas: parental leave and childcare. Now, as far as leave, we do have something called FMLA, or the Family Medical Leave Act. But there are these really specific requirements, and if you don't meet even one of them, you don't have your job guaranteed if you leave to give birth even for a day. So many women aren't even able to take this unpaid time. Women and their babies in close to 200 other countries around the world enjoy paid family bonding time, which on average is 4+ months, with most developed nations pushing closer to a full year or more. I was in the very small sliver of women that had access to a short employer-sponsored paid leave when I had my son. We joke that he's got impeccable timing. I mentioned before that I have built my career running events. Well, he was born just 10 days after my last major one for that season wrapped. Did I like being hugely pregnant during that busy crunch time at work? Not really, but I wanted to spend every hour of my maternity leave I had with him. I went into labor on a Monday evening. He was born Tuesday morning. My husband had exactly 3 personal days he could take as a teacher. That Friday was Good Friday. The week following was spring break. So we were able to spend a whole 2 weeks together as a new family of 3. Impeccable timing. I remember the first time that I left my son home with my husband. We were living in Queens, and I needed to run into Manhattan to a store called Motherhood Maternity to buy nursing bras. It's one of those items nobody tells you to register for. And I was brand newly postpartum. I was desperate. The whole 2 hours I was gone from my newborn, and I was making small talk with the salesperson who's helping me. She was asking me all about my new baby, how old he was, 2 weeks. Was he sleeping? Not for more than 20 minutes at a time. Was he eating constantly? Yes, hence the need for nursing bras. And then she shared with me that her daughter turned 3 weeks old that very day. And she had been back to work for nearly a full week. She had given birth the week before I did. Her daughter was 1 week older than this tiny newborn, and she was working a full-time job. I was sweating 2 hours. She was back at work full-time. And perspective never taps you on the shoulder, right? It knocks you right down. In fact, 1 in 4 women in the United States are forced to return to work within 2 weeks of giving birth, when their baby is not adjusted to life outside the womb, when their bodies are far from healed. Here in one of the richest nations in the world, that's not just heartbreaking, it's unconscionable. And it's not just lack of access to leave that is an issue. When you go back to work, whether you're lucky enough to enjoy that special time with your newborn or you're still raw and battered from childbirth, finding high quality and affordable childcare options continues to be an issue. Many families simply can't afford the cost of daycare or a nanny. Here in New York, on average, it's higher than monthly rent. So one parent, most often the mother, will opt out of the paid workforce. Now, I fully support those parents who stay home to raise their children full-time. But what's hailed as a choice is very likely the only option that many women have. We were extremely fortunate to find mostly convenient daycare locations that offered mostly convenient hours that for several years required most of my take-home paycheck. I joke that when my son started kindergarten, I got a pay raise. Well, that tiny newborn is 10 years old now, and he's largely self-sufficient, but being a working mom is always a juggle and sometimes a struggle. Here I am running the first major virtual event that I produced with my team. Note the 4th grader, who at that moment needed some help logging into his Google Meet. Some of the best advice that I was given about the work-life juggle is that inevitably, from time to time, you will drop the ball. The key is to know which of those balls are made of rubber and which ones are made of glass. When the schools and daycares closed last March, many women who had the luxury of doing their job remotely started to squeeze a full 40-hour work week on the edges of the day, while also doing the majority of remote schooling and housework and childcare. My own sister started a brand new job that first week of pandemic lockdown, while also parenting that girl from the It's a Girl balloon, my niece. She worked early mornings, late evenings, every waking hour of the weekend to upskill to her new job responsibilities, exhausted after full-time parenting a preschooler. But her story was not unique. She wasn't alone in this. There have been so many women who have been pushed out of the workforce this past year that economists are calling this the she-cession. We're no longer juggling balls here. We've moved on to knives. And a job that you can do flexibly is certainly better than no job at all, but these contortions have bent women past their breaking point. And those women who are working 2 or 3 low-wage jobs to make ends meet before, or those women who lost their jobs completely, they were walking a very thin tightrope. And now they've been put in an impossible situation. This circus can't go on. So, what's the solution? What's that proverbial straw that will break the glass ceiling? I believe that the answer lies in both the valuing of and the investing in care. At present, child care workers, arguably those who are doing some of the most important work in our society, make $11.65 an hour. That's not a living wage in most places. When we first moved to Goshen, we lived directly across the street from my son's daycare. That was one of the really convenient locations. And I'm forever in debt to those women who provided him a safe and loving environment. But I saw the beat-up cars they drove. I heard their engines struggling to start at the end of the day when the last child was picked up. The children of today, in the 1950s, Eisenhower signed the Federal Highway Aid Act, and that set into motion the largest public works project in history. Critical investments were made to build a system of roadways that created jobs. Just as essential as a road is in getting to work, care is the work that enables all other work to be accomplished. And for too long, we've taken the unpaid and undervalued work, mostly done by women, for granted. It hasn't been a give and take, it's been taken. The children of today are the backbone of tomorrow's workforce. Let's invest in a human infrastructure that not only nourishes these youngest and most vulnerable members of our society, but also the women who gave birth to them and the people who provide care for them. Can't we, one of the richest nations in the world, invest in these jobs, make them higher paying, more sustainable? Can't we offer paid leave to both moms and dads? Can't we make childcare options that are affordable for working families? And when that girl from the It's a Girl balloon, or any one of my other nieces, or my nephew or my son have kids of their own one day, can't we say that we did everything we could to make it easier for them? In the same way investing in a girl's education abroad can lift nations out of poverty, in the same way that investing in bridges and roadways can fuel economic growth, I believe that the investment in care would allow families, communities, and our nation to thrive. Now, this is not something that's in our country's collective comfort zone, but that's where the growth happens. Thank you.